point of view that he expressed earlier, we are, I think this group did try to be fair across the whole region, and we were conscious that we were putting some big sums of money into the FO for the aquatic centre and for the community centre. So, had those things not been there, this one might have been, but we're trying to be fair right across the region. So that fell off, not because it...
Maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe on another occasion.
Okay, and the other question is, I just want to know, is there anything in the AT budget that's funded around reinstating rail to Huapai?
Don't think so.
Yeah.
Through the Chair, Councillor, no, it's in the ATAP project at a higher level. It's part of the, it's not about rail, it's about the light rail out to Huapai as part of the rapid transit network. That's how they've planned it, so there's nothing in there about heavy rail to Huapai.
Thank you. I'll reserve my right to speak, Mr Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Philipana.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the 204,000 for each of the first 3 years to the Māngere Mountain Education Trust. Has the 90-odd thousand from the local board been factored into that? The reason I ask is because the reason I ask is because obviously that the local board will make a decision as to whether they continue to support the Māngere Mountain Education Trust post this decision. Alistair.
The money in the Merrill proposal would be additional to any funding that the local board provides.
So supplementary, have the Māngere Mountain Education Trust been advised that the local board could possibly withdraw their grant as a result?
I don't think those discussions have been had yet. The local board hasn't considered funding for the trust for next year.
Yeah, I know you've spoken to them, but they will be making a decision around whether they continue to or not, and it'd be good to relay that, I think. Alistair.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. And I'm just talking to the item 14 to do with Regional Facilities Auckland. Just in terms of their budget that's spelt out here, and I think councillors have been made aware of it, but I think again it's one of these important ones that should be just put on the record so everyone knows what that budget means, and that written confirmation given out to councillors, and I'm just seeking confirmation of this, is that that budget in its entirety in terms of the 8.39 million is going to renewals expenditure, things like toilet block and refurbishment, but more importantly there is no specific funding in there within the LTP for the development of Western Springs into a cricket stadium. I think that's important because I know there's a number of councillors around the table that would have assumed a larger significance today if that had been the case, but it's not the case. There is nothing in there to do with the cricket stadium, and any such move to secure funds for the cricket stadium would result or will need to result in RFA coming back to a meeting of the Finance and Performance Committee at a future date. So I had amendments ready to go, that they are not necessary in light of that revelation, Councillor Clow, and I certainly know that myself and a number of colleagues look forward to debating that in more appropriate circumstances if indeed that ends up eventuating.
Could that be appended to the minutes, Mr Chair? I don't think it needs to be. It's been circulated there. I don't think that needs to be. It's on record, very specific as to how it's said there. And I think a key thing is, which Councillor Watson reflects on, is of the general maintenance improvement budget. 88% is actually contractually already committed, so there is no issue there. So I think that's the key one. Right, well, we seem to have run out of questions. Councillor Casey, a question?
No, not question.
Oh, well, that's...
Sorry.
There are questions. Councillor Hills and Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. I just have two questions. So I had a question about savings before. Do you have the figures on what total savings we're making and projected to make yearly at the moment? Combined savings per year?
Sorry, through the chair, I'm going to be, I won't get the phasing exactly right, but I think we've talked about the number, but I'm happy to reconfirm. In the first 3 years of the LTP, it's a profile of ongoing permanent savings that's effectively 20-20-20, building to 60 million by year 3. That's focused on that element of council's cost base where identifying savings is a credible task. So it's not, for example, we can't focus on depreciation lines and interest lines because that's not a credible place to go and find those savings. So there's reference to the opportunity set for council that doesn't provide the right context because, effectively there's around a $1.5 to $2 billion cost base which you can target that effort at. But confirming, approximately it moves around slightly, but year 1, year 2, year 3, we increase our savings by 20 million per annum and we're targeting just over 60 by year 3.
And so what's the combined savings per year we're now making based on 2010?
Oh, if you go back to the amalgamated entity, well, they're very significant. So I think, Ross, at the last annual plan, we had a number that was in excess of 200 million. But
Quarter of a billion.
Yeah, I think slightly over 200 million, and then with this extra 60, you're getting pretty close to 300 million savings compared to those per annum.
Can I just add to it as well? People do get a bit confused when we use these numbers, and I think it's quite important. So what we're saying there is relative to a base case that was established at the time of amalgamation, and clearly time moves on, but I just want to make sure people understand the number we're talking about. Against forward projections at that time, the organisation has successfully identified in the realm of 250 to 300 million per annum permanent savings that we would enjoy each year. When people use the number in the billions, what they're doing is they're adding that cash flow up each year. But to get, and I think you asked the question earlier, Councillor Hills, when you talked about our capital program. So the contribution of those savings to the capital program for this LTP, if you wanted to think about it in that way, is in the order of about $600 million. Yeah.
So basically the savings are allowing us to do more capital. We're not just banking some magical savings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The other thing is, on the grants, and I'm really excited that we managed to get that in the proposal on the $4.3 million increase in the arts grants. How much has that increased over the last 5 years before this LTP? This is quite a substantial increase for.
Through the chair, I would need to check that through the finance team, but I think this is the first increase since the regional grants program came into effect.
Thank you very much.
200,000 was the last.
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right. Just checking, are there any more questions? All right, so there are no more questions. So what we're going to do is we're now going to go on to the First Amendment, which has been put up by Councillor Darby, which is there, and it's been has a seconder. So we're going to give Councillor Darby the right to speak.
Thanks, Chair. And I've got one other small one which I'd not alert, but it's just, can I just bring it to your attention? It's just maybe the addition of a couple of words. It's on B24. I understand that grant is up to 475, and it's specifically for building consent fees, resource consent fees, and DCs. Can I just ask, have staff confirmed that they are the actual numbers, or are the numbers to yet be determined and therefore it's appropriate that it's up to 475.
Agree.
Those are the best estimates of the costs that we have at this stage.
Would it be reasonable then that it's up to 475 if those fees, remember it's just fees, come in under that?
I'm looking at the Mayor because it's his proposal.
What we're doing here is, as I think you'll understand, Councillor, is not waiving the building fee or the development contribution, because that sets a precedent that would be unhelpful, but saying that we will give a grant that is approximate to the level of the fees. We don't know exactly what those level of the fees are, so we've given our best guess there, and I think, you know, it might be 25,000 under, it might be 25,000 over, or we're not sure, but putting that figure in, it's a placing figure. We could amend it over time if necessary, or we could simply say that is the approximate grant, and this is our acknowledgement of the work you're doing. So you are paying your fees, you are paying your development contribution, but we will give you money that is approximately at the level that you will be otherwise paying us. So I don't think it needs to be more exact than that. It could be a little over, in which case you'd want to maybe consider your options as to whether we made a subsequent change to it. Does that help?
It does help, and look, I'm totally supportive of the Mayor's proposal, particularly in that area. I'm just, if it is for actual fee cost, it probably, you know, should reflect that. But I'm probably not going to waste my political mileage on that one. Thank you. Can I go to B10 and the amendment? And thank you, Councillor Filipaina, and some other councillors who have had a discussion on this. Our smoke-free policy, it had a bit of a rocky start. We addressed it again in 2017, and we signalled the need for an implementation plan. You don't just have a policy without giving it some legs, and ultimately the legs require budget. Our staff came to us last week in a workshop, and there were lots of affirmative heads around the table, and many of you will recall saying that, yep, we're up for the 2.8, and suddenly it appeared at 1.4. I checked in with the staff, and it's clear that this is not going to deliver on the policy expectations or the implementation plan that we were aware of last year. So the initial proposal was 2.8, which was approximately 920k per annum for only the next 3 years. Remember, this is going smoke-free by 2025. And that would have increased awareness to be smoke-free, and it would have specifically provided the interventions for the high prevalence smokers, and we know which categories they are. It would have also provided CapEx for resource production, including signage and many other things, and it also would have allowed for partnering with the key external stakeholders that we've heard from overnight, which is the Cancer Society, Auckland Regional Public Health Service, and Hapai Te Hauora, Māori Public Health Service. So 1.4 will not deliver on our expectations. Remember, we signed up a policy. You've got to back policies up, folks. I'm not, after consideration with staff, Karaina Maki, and the Mayor, thank you, Mayor, I'm not proposing we go back to the 2.8. I'm proposing 2, and I've checked some other budgets as well. This does allow for more promotion in centres, beaches, interventions towards the high prevalent smokers, and so staff have told me that there are also sponsorship opportunities, which I entirely endorse, that we can't be wearing this just ourselves. And I think there is definitely, I'm firmly of the view that Ministry of Health and DHBs need to pick up part of the tab too. So that's work for us to do externally, rather than just go back to the 2.8. I'm proposing 2. I'm seeking your support on World Smoke Free Day, which is today.
Right, thank you, Councillor Darby. Was it Councillor Cooper, did I see? No?
No, I was actually just making sure I got my hand up for some of the stuff that we had questions earlier, didn't we?
Yeah, well, no, this can be now questions about this because it's an amendment. So
no, I'm just a bit confused. We've had questions about B, And now we're doing amendments about B, and you do the amendment, then we get to speak to the other stuff.
Yes.
Right, thank you. Just
So are there any questions about Councillor Darby and Councillor Filipaina's resolution?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cashmore.
I'm not sure if you guys can answer this, but is there ability within the council to deliver effectively on that extra increase of 600k?
I think maybe I can just have a crack at that, Mr. Chair. I did emphasise opening up this session that we had to keep strictly within the prudent financial limits on our fiscal management of council. I've had foreshadowed to me 3 amendments, one of which comes out of existing funding, the other 2 which add up to a relatively small amount. I couldn't stand up here and say that's totally unaffordable. I think Councillor Darby has reached a sensible and a fair compromise. I'm won over by the fact that it is World Smoke Free Day. I think that was incredibly clever timing. But look, in this area, it's how long is a piece of string? It could be any sum. But yeah, I'm relaxed as the formal proposer of this budget to increase that by the 600,000 recommended here. And I'm equally relaxed if I foreshadow about Councillor Fletcher's comment for the one-off payment to CABs of 200,000 and Councillor Bartley's wanting to specify a particular marae within an existing fund. I think these are things we can cope with. I'm trying to be flexible, but anything with a big sum attached to it, I wouldn't be able to accommodate. I think we can accommodate these 3 particular amendments.
Councillor Cooper. Oh, Ross, sorry.
Sorry, just the advice I've had is the organisation is able to deliver the additional activity that the 600k would allow, and the advice is it would give a better outcome better outcome in that area if you were to apply more resources. So it's simply a question of priority and whether you want to, what level you want to fund this.
Thank you.
Question on the amendment?
Yep, it's Councillor Cooper has a question, I think.
No, I'm all right. I think I've clarified.
My congratulations to Councillor Darby for bringing this to our attention. I just wonder, in the interests of his comments earlier, whether we agree to an operational funding of up to 2 million and also include the possibility of sponsorships somewhere in that, because I applaud what is intended behind this, but it is one where we do need to be thinking in terms of partnerships, and it would be nice to have some reference to the opportunity for sponsorship as we work together on this.
I agree. Up to.
Yeah, no, I'm cool.
Thank you. Agreed.
Agreed? Up to? All right. Right, any comments? Do we need any further discussion? Councillor Filipaina, as the seconder.
Yeah, look, just to say as well, and Councillor Fletcher's mentioned Councillor Darby, and to say thank you. I attended the breakfast from Cancer Society this morning, and obviously they asked questions on this particular issue, and I just said, look, Councillor Darby's going to look at putting an amendment through, which they were happy with, so they're waiting on the result. Councillor Darby, and again I say thank you. Also thank you to the to Councillor Collins and Bartley, who we've been talking around what is good. Can I just sort of bring the attention of the implementation plan that Councillor Darby mentioned, Council Smoke-Free Policy 17 to 25? Because if you have a look at that document, and this is in particular to your question, Deputy Mayor, is that if you have a look at the tables, there is a hell of a lot of stuff that money will go through. That includes tupuna maunga, that includes also working with our groups, that include working with our local boards. And I mean, there's a chart with the tables. There's a chart which says dark green activity is underway, lighter green will take place during 17-18, but the most important one for me is the green line, which is planned to take place in the future if additional resources and budget are forthcoming. The fact that we've got the additional budget will end up helping implement the policy that Councillor Darby has spoken to. And I mean, in particular, if you have a look at our implementation plan, if you have a look at Table 2, Table 3, and it just gives you a heck of a lot of work. So, again, Councillor Darby, thank you so much for alerting the issue with myself, Councillor Collins and Councillor Bartley, and I just hope it gets support around this table. Thank you.
All right, there doesn't appear anyone else that wants to speak, so I will put this amendment. I don't think we need a division on this. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? There's none, so that will become the substantive when we come to vote on B as a whole, so that is in. All right, we'll move to the second amendment that's been proposed, which is in front of you here. No, that's not the second amendment. I want to go to the other amendment, the CAB. We present them in their order.
It's to bear arms.
Come in, so there is the second amendment.
Kathy, it's to bear arms.
Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had hoped to have actually made my general observations in and around this section on Parks and Community, because I think there is an awful lot to be applauded. And may I take this opportunity on thanking Matthew and his team. The staff have been extraordinary in terms of giving information to us. It's been a really productive period. We did have a lot of external funding requests, and I've gone through pages and pages, and I've got to say to the Mayor, it's as well he wants to plant as many trees as he does, because I think we've chopped down a hell of a lot of them in this jolly budget. However, one that did not come through in the external funding requests was that from the Auckland Citizens Advice Bureau. And I would like to move, along with Councillor Newman, who has agreed to second this, we approve a one-off baseline funding increase of $200,000 pending a review of Citizens Advice Bureau in Auckland and their funding model in April 2019, which will be undertaken by the Environment and Community Committee. And so the context that I want to put this to you is in that the CAB is all about volunteers. They're not professional lobbyists. You know, they are volunteers, and they thought because they didn't take part in some of the regional consultations, they couldn't do this, and they were quite aghast when others came forward and their proposal didn't in terms of the external funding requests. So. As I say, they're not skilled lobbyists. I think it's a jolly shame because, as we heard earlier in the debate around the fuel tax, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to really struggle at times, and it is our CABs, staffed by their volunteers, that provide a lot of the support for our struggling communities. So I don't want to in any way undermine the decision that Environment and Community have taken in terms of having a funding review. That's really, really important. But this just gets them through this next year until such time as we can have the funding review. It's not an extravagant request on their part, and I think they'd obviously like to have the certainty of knowing that they would have it throughout subsequent years. But I'm only proposing to you that we do it just as a one-off, just until April 2019, when the review of the funding model can be undertaken. But I would like to acknowledge the work that CABs do in all of our communities. It's very much a regional issue, and it is about volunteers, and maybe we need to think about how we support some of those volunteers in their applications in the future, because I know with voluntary organisations how hard it is for them to sort of navigate, whether it's lotteries or council or whatever it might be, the funding processes. So I put this to you in the hope that you can support it. Thank you.
So before I take Councillor Watson, just note that the mover and the seconder are happy with this to become a new amendment, so just make that noted. So whether we need many questions or much debate is up to the councillor. So Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to speak very briefly in support of Councillor Fletcher's amendment, and to thank you very much for bringing it forward, because it's one of the aspects of council's funding that really gives us a great return. The amount of goodwill and community good that these CABs right across Auckland deliver is quite phenomenal. And I would suggest actually they fill a bit of a void from council, you know, especially given the increasing centralisation of council resources. So I would hope that everyone would support it, and I think that while there's been a number of sterling efforts to provide more of that social aspect to the budget, there are groups like this who do feel a bit neglected, who do their work out of the genuine goodness of their heart. So if we can provide this small reinforcement of that, I think that will be greatly appreciated, and in terms of social return will definitely come out way on top.
Right, I'm assuming there are no questions, so I'm going to go to Councillor. Is there a question? Sorry.
Comment.
Yeah.
Comment from the seconder, but I don't mind going afterwards.
Yeah, but you have a question.
Yep.
Yes, right.
Yep, thank you.
Go ahead.
I don't know who to ask the question to.
We'll just try the question.
Try the question look, first. I'll just ask a generic question out here, and whoever wants to answer it. Just through you, Chair. Look, I just have questions around what happens with that 200,000. How do we allocate the money? Because I know, for example, in Otahuhu, the local board, Mangere Otahuhu local board, are actually funding a CAB at the moment. I also know of ones in my area that are struggling to survive. So I just wanted, but I don't know who to ask that particular question, because it's good having the 200,000, but I just don't know how we're going to allocate it, because
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to have a go at part of it. Since amalgamation, as you'd be aware, the increase in requirement from across the region has gone up nearly 50%, but their funding on amalgamation has been capped. They are wanting, and it is particularly in areas such as your own, they're wanting to be able to make the public more aware of the services that are provided by the volunteers. I know that they wrote to all of the councillors yesterday talking about where some of the gaps are. And as I said, 200,000 is actually a really modest amount when you think of the scale and the size of the region. So as an organisation, I think they do have the competency to be able to handle what is quite a modest sum, but they are not actually making, with the pressure on their services, where it's gone up 41% with the capped funds, they're not able to make ends meet at the moment. So I suspect this is really just a stopgap measure, and that is why the review, which your committee, along with the chair, Councillor Hulse, and that review is going to be so critically important. This is simply a stopgap measure.
I understand that. It's just that I still, it's the process that I'm looking at. I mean, how do you allocate when you've got ACABs? You've got ACABs, and it's not the Citizens Advice Bureau. The money will be going to ACABs, who will allocate. That's my understanding, and that's why with that it has to go to ACABs. This is why we ended up coming through the committee, and then sorry, I know it's turned into a comment, but I just want to get this process right, Chair, because...
Right. So what we're suggesting would happen is there will be a report coming back on how there would be the appropriate allocation of this 200,000, without getting into it now, because remember, we had to kick for touch on this one before because it was just getting too much of a hornet's nest. So I'm going to ask the chair of that relevant committee, Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. I'm relieved to hear that, because I'm just backing up what Councillor Philippine is saying. The reason we're reviewing the funding formula is because it's actually inequitable. You know, it doesn't actually deal to the areas that need it the most, and it gives quite a lot to the areas that don't need it. It also is quite questionable about the delivery. You know, and we had the stats very recently. This is delivering hugely on questions around the delivery of government services, not council services. The percentage of council issues dealt with by CABs is very low. So I agree with Councillor Philippina. I think Chair the report coming back on how the 200,000 will be allocated is exceedingly sensible, because what we don't want to do is just reinforce an already inequitable situation. That's the, we're getting a bit circular here. So by all means, if they are struggling at the moment, let's help, but let's not, go overboard and preempt what I think a very good review is going to be all about. And let's not forget that almost half of our local boards supported the review and supported the more equitable funding model, which takes into account deprivation. We currently don't.
My turn?
Yeah. We have
So we're not
Collins.
saying no, we're just saying yes, but let's be
Get it right.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Sorry, but Councillor Collins got in the speaking order first, so I'm going to ask him, is there a question, Councillor Collins?
Not anymore, Chair.
Right, there you are. Also, so Councillor Newman.
The issue with the review and the problem with the review, Chair, is that there's been a review about how equitably to cut the pie, which is not actually addressing the issue of the scale of the pie. You address the scale of the pie through the 10-year plan, which is now actually, isn't it? That's what we're doing here today. So that's why this amendment's been put up by Councillor Fletcher, and I support and I second that amendment. You can't have a cap on funding for 7 years and not have an issue. In fact, there has been a reduction in real terms, and that has been set out in the correspondence from Diane Taylor to the Mayor and councillors in recent days, and it means that CABs are having to make decisions about, well, if we want to address the needs of a new community, we're going to have to close an existing bureau. That's where it's got to, and so there is a need for a funding stopgap until such time as we can address the review. I hope the review will address what the actual quantum of funding is actually required, rather than just simply addressing the issue of the mechanism for allocation as well as the formula for allocation. So my understanding of this amendment is this amendment would increase the baseline, and that the allocation of the baseline would be as per the existing formula, which would apply until such time as there is a new formula.
Yep.
And if you agree with that proposal, there's no reason why this amendment can't go forward today with a vote and support it.
I do not see that anyone is going to oppose it. However, we have one more speaker, which is Councillor Sayers.
Well, Chair, therefore then, Councillor Newman, you're saying that the Otahuhu Advice Bureau will not be funded at all. That's exactly what you're saying, and this is why I raised the question. You are now saying that $200,000, that's good, it'll go through to all the advice, all the Citizen Advice Bureau except Otahuhu. That's exactly what you're saying now. And no way am I going to vote for that.
Debate.
Councillor, can I just say, my understanding is there will be a report coming back about how we distribute this money. So, Councillor Newman can have an opinion, and you have, but we're going to get a report back. I think everyone understands that.
Can we therefore put that in the recommendation, Chair?
No, we don't need to.
That's all I'm asking. If there is a report coming back, can we put it in there? Because I will vote for it. But at the moment, Otahuhu Advice Bureau, Citizen Advice Bureau is getting none of that 200,000.
Okay, right. If we put right at the end, noting that a report.
But that's up to the mover and second.
Well, I'm asking the mover and the second. We could put on the end, noting that a report will come back to that committee. Blah blah. I was going to put pronto, but that's not an appropriate.
Very technical term.
Mr.
Pronto.
Chairman, as the mover, I would suggest that, noting that officers will give consideration and report back on this matter.
Yep.
So
that's good.
I would like it. I mean, this I'm hoping doesn't become too politicised. The intention of this is to simply ensure that CAB do not lose volunteers, and as Councillor Newman has correctly said, it's to grow the cake, not to spill it up. And as Councillor Hulse has also said, and I totally agree with her, why should central government get off the hook? They're not putting the funding into CABs, and that's why this review is actually going to be really important. This is just a stopgap measure.
Okay, how's that, Councillor? Sorry, the mover and seconder.
Sorry,
Noting
we'll give
that
consideration. Sorry, I struggle to read.
Yep, noting that officers will give consideration to the distribution of the funding in a report to the committee.
That's fine.
Not perfect, but it's okay. Right. We have Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, I wanted to speak in support of the amendment. I wanted to thank Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Newman for putting it forward. I think that this recent debate and the excellent questions have been very helpful, and thank you for including those additions there, Councillor Fletcher. I think that gives us all a bit of peace of mind. But look, this is going to one of Auckland's critical organisations as a one-off stopgap. I'm sure that the head organisation there will use it wisely, and I'm sure that report will be very useful. But I just want to congratulate the councillors again and thank you for the debate.
Okay, right. We have no further speakers, so I don't think this requires a division. So I'm going to put this amendment. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Right, there is none, so that will go into the overall substantive motion. And right, we have the third amendment, which is here, and moved by Councillor Bartley and seconded by Councillor Collins. I will say, councillors, this is actually something that in many ways the local board and the Ollie choice went for the big scale project in Onehunga. This was their second, effectively their second project was going to be the development of this marae. Maybe in hindsight the board, given that the other one's happening, so this would, if we could approve this without too much debate, this goes a long way to helping them get it off the ground and move it. And dare say that board will be coming back to us, I would think, in the next annual plan with progress on something they've been asking for a long time. So, Councillor Bartley, do you want to speak to this, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, just to thank officers for their support in drafting this up, thanking Councillor Whatnana for seconding this amendment, and really, it's really just about getting a commitment to what was promised to the marae in the previous mayoral proposal, and I realise we have a different mayor now, but I just, that promise is still there, and I want this council to honour that promise. And I do have an ulterior motive, and that is I have a time frame. And the time frame is one of the Nanimas, Whaia Nellie Kirkwood. The marae wants to turn the sod before she dies, and she's 92 years old. So her husband, Steve Kirkwood, was a former Auckland City Councillor. So there's a history of Auckland City Council supporting this marae in our community. So just wanting to see that commitment continued, and this amendment is one way to see that through. So thank you.
You don't need to apologise for an ulterior motive. I think
that's a very good ulterior motive.
That's a good one. Anyway, so do we want any? Yes, Member Typery.
It's going to seem much strange, I think. Is there a business plan that goes with this? I mean, look, let's be honest.
I'll ask Luella.
This is out an existing fund that's provided for all marae. That has to have certain requirements to provide certain information in order to be considered.
The officers will be able to answer that.
It's probably going to sound a little bit strange coming from me, but I'm all about fairness, transparency and equity. And, what is going to happen if this sort of stuff goes through on an LTP is that the next review you're going to get dozens of these requests from marae. And I'm not sure. And I say, I hear the Councillor Butt and what she says and why, and I'm not against that. But my goodness, it took a while to actually get some buy into this kind of provisioning. Was gone through the windmill in terms of requirements and criteria and the likes, and all of a sudden, in an LTP review, and I know I heard this been before, but it does concern me, and I'm thinking, what are all other marae going to think right now? Should they have come to the board, or should they have come to all the councillors to have sought their marae to be a part of it? So I mean, I see it more appropriate, honestly, in an annual plan rather than an LTP. If the money is already within the existing, seeking to be used within the existing fund that's set aside by the LTP, the scope of the money's there. But I'm a little hesitant, Mr. Chairman, so I'm trying to get some steer on one thing at least. Is there a business plan that goes with this?
Well, or Phil.
So this comes under the Tamaki regeneration work, and so the business case and the business plan are underway. It's in development.
Underway.
Underway. Can I add to this, please?
Please, I'm trying to think of all the marae across Auckland in this conversation, not just one. Okay, please.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. The business plan is underway. The hold-up is through council bureaucracy. That's where the hold-up is. There's issues with parks, with community facilities. You have 8 people contacting the marae, and really the marae just want one point of contact to deal with this. So I don't know why it's so difficult and cumbersome, but you know, the business case will come. They just need some help to get going or to get there. I wouldn't want to see this held up over them not having a business case.
Phil, do you want to say anything?
Look, through the chair, I appreciate the concern for process, and it's a very good point. What I would say is, I think this marae is in a quite unique situation, given the previous funding commitment that for some reason did not translate through adequately into the budget. And therefore, it needs to be we need to look to the contestable fund, the Marae Capital Development Fund, which has been increased previously and which can cope with this budget commitment without, I don't think, compromising what other marae might be seeking. So we're trying to keep faith with the community here in terms of an expectation that was created, and the amount of money that's discussed here will actually assist in the design and in, if you like, the development of the business case that will arise from that, which will be potentially a more substantial investment in the marae development longer term.
So I'm not against the marae. Okay, just be clear. The key words in that one was contestable fund, and the second one, you know, again, was, well, I guess my key question is really now is the LTP the appropriate mechanism to identify specifically a marae, or is it the annual plan that spends the money from the LTP?
Well, councillors, from the chair, I will speak. I am going to vote against this, and which is a shame, because I would have loved to have helped the Mangakiki Tamaki board on this, and as I mentioned, the advice given...
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? I feel you're making a positioning when I want to answer to my question about is the LTP the appropriate document for the annual plan?
I suppose I was about to answer from the chair with that answer.
But I didn't really ask if you were against it or not. I wanted to know, is the appropriate mechanism the LTP?
I personally think the appropriate mechanism is the annual plan, yes. So I'm going to speak because I don't think there are any more questions at this stage. There are, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Filipana.
Thank you, Chair. Tamaki Regeneration, are they putting in towards the marae? No, they're not.
Not specifically, no.
So...
Should be. They should be.
I just think, well, no, I totally agree. I think they should. And I think, but I don't know what process needs to take place in regards to getting Tamaki Regeneration to also contribute to Ruapōtaka Marae.
It's going to cost $6 million.
If I might Chair, I think it's important to recognise what the purpose of this money's for, and it's to get the project up to a point where we can consider more substantial funding for the development of the marae. It may be that there are other funding contributors in the longer term once that work's done, but to the point about annual plan or LTP, I believe now is the right time to have a discussion about that. Otherwise, we lose a year in terms of that preparatory work. I know it's awkward, but that's the reality of it.
Philip, I have a question, therefore. The question is this money being taken from a contestable fund?
Yes, it is. But it's a contestable fund that is managed according to some policy priorities set by you through the Community Development and Safety Committee, I think I'm right in saying. Yep. And it's my guidance would be that it is entirely appropriate if you choose to make a call today about pre-committing a small portion of that fund.
Councillor Cooper has a question.
I support this, but I'm a bit concerned because if it's a contestable fund, does that mean other people, this gives one group a bit more of an advantage? Because, I mean, I know there's another marae, another iwi that are really keen, and I know this is a Mata Waka, and that's really important too, but there's another, at least 2 maraes in my ward that are keen to be built as well, and I could ask that an equal amount of money put aside for those 2, and I don't even know the size of this, and I'm a bit worried that then even then takes away. So, and I very clearly heard from Rua Potaka when they came at our shareholders meeting, and I absolutely support us supporting them, but I'm just a bit worried that it's almost like
They didn't come to the shareholder meeting.
They did. They
excuse me, through
stakeholder
the chair,
meeting.
through the chair,
Sorry,
please.
they came to the stakeholder meeting. They talked about a marae here.
Through the chair.
So that's my concern. What is? How is that working then?
So I wouldn't like to you to have an impression that this is a brand new thrown onto the table at the 11th hour. This marae development's been under discussion for quite a while. It's been considered in relation to that contestable fund. The problem has been that it wasn't sufficiently ready to be considered for the funding earlier, and there are practical problems in terms of the reserve status of the land that have needed to be worked through. It just happens to be the right time now to put the decision on the table for you. And why now, again, to Councillor Bartley's point, that it keeps faith with an understanding the community had was that the funding was going to be committed.
It's a special
so just another question on. So what you're saying is that because the right time is now and the conversations have already been had, then this would have been absolutely favourably considered in the fund because of all the work that's been done, and now the reserve revocation and all that's been sorted.
That's my assessment of it, and Luella might comment, having helped guide some of the consideration of marae investment, but of course it never made it to the point of testing that with the committee.
That's correct.
Right, does anyone want to put their head on the block and comment further on this? So I will. I won't vote against this, but I will abstain from this, and I'll just do it because I'm showing respect to Councillor Casey and Councillor Filipaina, who we were talking about contestable funds before, and we argued quite strongly that going against process in the case of contestable funds was not appropriate, and I'm afraid I don't see this as anything different. I hear you say it's almost a halfway house a bit further on, but I'm not convinced, and I'm sorry. As Chair, I'm uncomfortable with that. I can't argue in one situation and then be flexible half an hour later. So I'll give notice I will abstain on this one. I haven't noted that I abstain. So any further people, anyone else wishes to comment? Filipana.
Chair, I'm going to support this, and the reason I'm going to support it is as a result of what Mr. Wilson just said. What he said and what he explained, from my perspective anyway, was the fact that it's been happening for a few years. It would have fitted the criteria in regards to what was passed, and I think it went through the policy Phil and I stand again always corrected, but it went through our committee, my committee in the second term, I think, that it ended up going through, and the fact that at least there's one issue from what you're telling me is around the revocation and the reserve status. Once that's sorted out, it's really ready to go. And that's really the reasons why I will be voting for it, because I can't see the connection with that, knowing the circumstances now in relation to what we said earlier around the 72,000. So, look, I just want to make that clear. If it happened, and I'm taking the word of Phil here, that yes, it would have been done if it wasn't for the revocation of the reserve status.
All right, well, there doesn't appear to be anyone else who wants to comment on this, so we've got to move in a second. I'll put the vote. All those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone against? And we'll note my abstention, please. Right, we are now back to the... In the whole, we're back to B. We are now... Yep. So we've finished questions, but I'll just check. Are there any other questions that have come to light that, you know, you might have thought about at lunchtime that we didn't have? So, right. Sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to the officers, and it relates to the local board's ollies. When we're looking, looking at 15 here, when we're looking at these in the future, have the officers got a view on any improvements, what lessons?
Councillor Fletcher, are you talking about the transport ollies or because the ollies is in item number 10?
Yes, I know, but just in a general sense, because it falls under transport, it falls under sub-regional, and it also then comes under item number 10. I'm happy to hold my comments back till that time.
If it's on transport or it's on sub-regional, no, please, but to be technically correct, if it's on the
I'll hold
ollies.
off. I've got other things to talk about if you want.
Thank you.
Right.
Any further questions, folks? Councillor Watson.
Sorry, just on the centres development, is that appropriate?
Yeah, no, if it's a question, yep.
Yeah, and it is...
Any of the Bs?
Yeah, so it is a question I raised before, but didn't receive a response to, and that's with respect of the further comment that some of the $11 million for the berthing of super yachts, which is included in this program, so $11 million, is to be recovered from operating revenue managed by Panuku. That's a rather kind of loose description, if you don't mind me saying so, Mr. Chair. We were meant to get something more specific than that. That hasn't happened, so I would just like to know what sum might mean, seeing it's an $11 million sum.
Sorry, can you just give us a reference on that, John?
Sorry, that's on page 53.
What recommendation is it?
Recommendation just to do with the 55 million. I understand this 11 million is part of that.
Okay.
Potential for some of the 11 million.
Stephen, are you able to shed some light?
What happened in the final negotiations with the Crown on America's Cup was that Panuku would take responsibility for the capital provision of super yacht berths, and they would therefore then bank all of the revenue to fund that. And so they're saying that will be a self-funding activity as we lead into the America's Cup.
100%. So we get it all back?
Well,
you'll service it over time. You won't get it all back in a 12-month period. You'll get it back over time, just like we do with other berthing investments that Panuku run.
Thank you, CEO. I understand that. I thought they had some more detailed plan as to what that might amount to in terms of timeline and specifics, but obviously that's not the case.
Yeah, not yet, Councillor, through you, Chair, but they are busy taking bookings for super yachts of various sizes, and that will inform the range and number of different size berths that they've got a plan for over the next 18 to 24 months.
Right, now we're on to comments, and I have Councillor Casey, Filipina, Fletcher and Cooper, and then Newman and Hills.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This started out as a mayor's budget, but today it's the Auckland Council budget, and I think it's a really good budget, and there's something in it for everybody, something in it for every part of the region, and I want to congratulate the mayor on the process that got us to today. I've already done the brickbat, and I will be voting against XX, which is to remove the Festival of Photography from the long-term plan, but the other three things I want to say are all bouquets. Mayor's mentioned one, and that's the City Mission grant of 475k. Congratulations, that's great. That's just what they need. Two others, one I'm going to find hard and one I'm going to find easy, so I'll do the hard one first. I want to thank everybody here for supporting the Tupuna Maunga Authority, of which I'm a member. Yeah. Councillor Alfie is a member, and Josephine is a member. And I want to say in supporting, and Chris was a former member, and Chris Fletcher was a former member. And you were a former member. Here we go. This is why we never mention names. Right?
Oh, I was a former member too.
I was a former deputy chair.
But in supporting the funding for the Tupuna Maunga Authority, you're actually supporting their vision and their operation. And if you turn to our page, whatever it is, 27, part of the capital funding is to bring forward the restoration of the tihi of our maunga. We support the bringing forward of that, and that leads me into just saying that I wish that the local boards supported that and talk about the Devonport meeting the other night. I have to do this because I want to acknowledge Paul Majuri as chair and Nick Turoa as a staff member who fronted a very hostile meeting that issued many kinds of provocation and racism, and it was awful to be there. And so what you've done today is restate this council in all its forms, all 149 elected members. We support the Maunga Authority in what it's doing. So I hope this gets back to the Devonport Takapuna local board, because they were present and they did nothing to stop it. In fact, it could be argued that they helped it on its way. So having said that, moving right along. Simon Collins wrote a piece recently in the Herald that basically said I was a kind of useless councillor because I didn't maximise my opportunities by lobbying. Well, actually, Simon, you're right. I don't know if you're still... Oh, you are. Simon's absolutely right, because at the recent Community Development and Safety Committee, we had a round of funding for... It was a grant called Regional Arts and Culture. And what was perfectly obvious, it was way oversubscribed, and we turned down 8. And lovely Richard across there said, well, what's the mechanism for changing this? And we told him what it was. It's this process. And the lovely Alfie, who chaired the committee last time at Arts and Culture, has done a power of work to get this to where it is today. Thank you to the mayor. It's not a lot of money, but increasing those 3 buckets of money by 400k a year means that lots and lots of... That means that probably these 8 organisations, and all they were turned down for was lack of available budget. So wonderful proposals, they were all expectant, and we had to say, sorry, no. So hopefully they'll come back to the next round, and this time they will be funded. So that means an awful lot to, not just the members of the committee, not just the council, but to the community out there. And so that was a great thing to do. And so Simon, just on lobbying, once we got a resolution, a unanimous resolution of that committee, I then sent an email to all members of the Finance Committee pleading for their support and noting that you said that I don't lobby and I should. And I had really good responses back from everybody. As a result, we've got this. So thanks to you, really. So thank you. Can we record in the minutes? Simon Wilson has made me a better councillor, more effective councillor, higher achiever. Thank you very much.
I get to be a senior one now.
God.
Oh, no.
It's too late. He's already written the article about today.
That's all.
Okay. Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. Your Worship, thank you. Thank you, and I'm not going to speak about, and I wanted to, but I'm not going to speak about the Western Initiative, because I'm going to leave that to the councillors in there. But I do, again, want to thank you And I just want to go on from Kathy. Your Worship, these are some of the groups, and there's actually 4 funds. One is the Strategic Relationship Grant that you've now, and we will hopefully confirm that you've increased. And some of the groups here, Object Space, Show Me Shorts, and the Manuka Orchestral Society. And then we've got our business and capacity development project grants, and Your Worship, from there is Arts Alliance, the Auckland Performing Arts Centre at Western Springs, massive company trust, and we know the work that all those, but Massive does. And you've also audience development and programming project grants. Again, Kathy's mentioned those. And the 4th one is our Regional Events Fund. So, Your Worship, thank you. Thank you for putting it through as a proposal, and I'm hoping that I'm going to say thank you to everybody here, including Independent Māori Statutory Board, because all these groups, Chamber of Music, look, that they will hopefully, when they go through the process, will end up getting supported by us. So I say thank you to those groups that will hopefully in the next round get supported. Your Worship, under Māori Outcomes, can I say again, thank you in regards to the 35 million that you put in there. I just hope that the people at this committee don't get the idea that the 35 million is going to the Independent Māori Statutory Board. No, it's not. It's not going to them. It's actually going through to the outcomes, and we all know about the 3 audits that were done around the Treaty of Waitangi, and you know, we're moving in the right direction in regards to that, so thank you. I said thank you around the Māngere Mountain Education Trust and on behalf of the local board, because I got a fair idea what the local board wants to do with it. And I'm just going to say general to our staff, you know, to our staff, thank you so much for all the work that you've done, and you know, to bring in us to here. So, you know, Stephen, to you, Matthew, and all the staff, thank you so much. And the reason I'm saying that, because I won't be talking at all now. I've finished my little thank yous, and then I'll just shut up. So thank you.
Thank you. We now can add Councillor Filipaina to Councillor Simpson. That's on the no talkie list. So, right. I'm going to allow Councillor Newman just to jump ahead, because staff didn't pass on to me. He had a question or two. So I'm going to allow that. Then we're coming back to Councillor Fletcher.
Is Pearl still here? Solid waste questions. Is she?
No, we're not there yet.
No, that's C.
That's C.
C.
Oh, we're not at C
the whole lot.
No, we're just doing B, all the B.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Right, Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we all know in our own ways how to be forces for good in our communities, and how we can leverage off opportunities and grow the dollars, and partnerships are the way ahead. But I really want to highlight my support for the Sports and Recreational Facilities Investment Fund. This is a magnificent opportunity for us to work with other organisations, with philanthropic partners, and implicit behind it is going to be the work we're going to do under the Sports Facility Investment Plan. It is such a huge ask when we look at the needs right across Auckland, when we look at the opportunities we've got for really inspiring our youth. And later on, I'm sure that Councillor Watson will talk about his initiative, his funding initiative in terms of Hibiscus Coast, and we talk about suicide prevention, and we talk about the benefits of regular exercise. And in my own case, some of you know that I live on a daily basis with someone with front lobe dementia, but we know that the statistics around dementia, we can reduce that by 40% by just having in place those opportunities for regular exercise. So looking at things holistically, you know, this is a wonderful, wonderful fund, and so I want to acknowledge it. And I also want to acknowledge some of the other really good initiatives in here. Obviously, there's been a lot of pain and discussion around getting to the point where we know that we've got a sustainable art gallery, and all of us feel proud of the art gallery, but it was not easy getting there, so I want to acknowledge, as the Mayor did before, all of those who have championed this and seen that come forward. I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Newman for bringing forward very passionately the needs of the Botanic Garden and the OPEX required in terms of sculpture in the park. That might not be a huge sum in the scheme of things, but when you think of the impact that it's had on, all Aucklanders, but particularly in the south, and the way that it's introduced many people for the first time to sculpture and the opportunities there. I'd also like to recognise the Marine Rescue Centre, and I know that Councillor Simpson can't talk at the moment, and I'm not sure for how much longer, but the Marine Rescue Centre is an area that we really should be putting a bit of time into. Good that we're getting some work done to try and see the jolly building stay afloat, but that was a gift from the outgoing Auckland Harbour Board to the people of Auckland, and it is a prime site, and it is something that we need to put our collective minds to make sure that for a harbour city such as Auckland, that we actually have the right facilities in place for that. Naturally, I'm thrilled about the City Mission. I was so pleased when they made the decision not to go out of the central Auckland area, as so many organisations have done. They've cashed up and they've moved their facilities into areas that are less expensive, but because we knew that the need is in the inner city. So all of these things are fantastic. I appreciated the clarification that was sought by Councillor Watson around the policy not being locked in on some of the RFA stuff. So, I'm naturally giving my support to that part of the budget today, but I am very clear that the caveat is that that does not imply any support in a policy sense. So again, can I just conclude by thanking all of those who have enabled us all to have some input in such a way that we feel our communities are going to benefit. I think it's been a good process. The point I was going to make before, and I can just say it now so you don't have to hear from me again too, is that I think with Ollies, if we're going to do them in the future, we do need to have a cap fund. I think going out in a general sense and sort of saying, oh, well, just tell us your best and your favourite project, sounds nice, but we all love Father Christmas, and I think it needs to have a wee bit more structure around it, and that is the way it's progressively come through with the transport and the sub-regional and so forth. But I think if we are to do that again, I'd just like to see a little more structure on it. So thank you, and I will conclude by saying one of the reasons with the environmental investment that I have been so pleased, and it applies to the sports initiative as well, it's been really hard without targeted funds for those staff to get the look in. They're always going to get knocked back because there will be other pressing needs. And we have some excellent staff working in the whole environmental area, but they're not the lobbyists, as I said before about the CAB. They're not necessarily well placed, and I think by moving towards the targeted rates, it's a good trend in that it may be insufficient for some of the aspirations we have, but it's trending in the right direction, and I think that it will make it easier for them to be able to champion the causes that need further funding into the future. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Can I correct the public record? I may have called Simon Wilson Simon Collins.
You did.
Let the record show it was Simon Wilson up there.
They're very similar.
Yeah, I can't tell the difference.
Give or take a metre.
Right, I've got Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is going to be a lot of thank you to the Mayor also, but I'm just going to reserve the right to be a bit grumpy at the end, but not at you.
Phew.
So first, I want to thank you for the extra 14.3 million over 10 years for Takaparafo and Pourewa, and a lot of people know it as Bastion Point, but it's Takaparafo and rightly named, and that really does honour after the 40th anniversary of the occupation and of Bastion Point and the sacrifices that the Hawke family in particular made, that you've actually honoured that, and we'll be able to get on and build a beautiful monument up there, which all of Auckland can be proud, and also all our visitors will see as they come up the harbour. and also the development of the nursery, which is going to support your million trees. So, and you know, it's an honour to be on that reserves board and co-governance, and I do find that's a really great way to govern in a co-governance model. Secondly, thank you so much. Surf Life Saving. When we did the last LTP, the Surf 1020 project was put to us. That was a 10-year project, 10 years to upgrade 20 surf life-saving buildings, from which, you know, tens of thousands of volunteers operate from and save lives. I mean, we have one of the highest drowning rates in the OECD, even higher than Australia, and we're supposed to be cleverer than them. And you know, we still managed to have that high drowning rate. And without people like the Surf Life Saving volunteers, we couldn't have that first response. We couldn't be teaching our kids about the great outdoors and the wonderful things like that. So when we came to this LTP, my expectation, and I think a lot of people's expectation, that would be carrying on that 10-year project, and it wasn't. And thank you, Mr Mayor, for hearing my plea on behalf of Surf Life Saving Northern to add that extra $3.7 million, which they can leverage up to $7.9 million. So they're not getting a handout, they're actually getting a hand up. So I really appreciate that, and I know that all the surfies and the people that enjoy our west coast, Kareatahi in the south, Orewa in the north, will be very thankful. So thank you for that. My grumpiness is, and just before Councillor Hull's comments on the Western Initiative, just for your information, and you would have seen it, the comments about why is it in the West. The recent Prosperity Index, the South is the lowest at 0.7 for shame of all of us, and West is next at 2.7, the highest is 9.8, and North Shore's up there too. So, you know, I have no qualms about accepting that, Mr Mayor, thank you. So for me, it's more around our transport out west, and for over a decade we've known that a busway is the right thing to do. It works really well on the North Shore. It's fast, it's really flexible. It can get off Lincoln Road, it can get off Te Atatu Road, it can get off the peninsula, it can just get on the motorway. We're being told, because there's a policy of the current government that they seem to like light rail. Yes, it might work on Dominion Road, but it's in the wrong place for the Northwestern Motorway. It's not a walk-up catchment. So I will be battling really hard for a busway on the Northwestern Motorway because it's the most flexible, affordable way to get fast, frequent, reliable public transport. And I don't think that our people in the West should be waiting any longer. This is the quickest option. They can't wait another 10 years. There's another at least 50,000 people for the Northwest, and this is for the people of Rodney as well, because we've just heard they're not going to get that train. You know, they're not going to get that train up to Kumeu. So the only way they're going to get fast, frequent, reliable public transport that doesn't need a viaduct over Brigham Creek Valley is to get a busway. So I just need to signal that, you know, I'll be pushing for that as hard as I can. I know that review's coming up, so I really believe that will be the right solution. But otherwise, you score highly, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I have Councillor Newman, and maybe he's going to be naughty again and ask a question.
All right, no, I'm not.
No, comments. So I have Councillor Newman, Councillor Hills, Councillor Sayers, Councillor Hulse and Councillor Darby. And then we will vote, but I might say something as well. Haven't said anything today.
Oh, look, just to acknowledge the officers for working at short notice to address matters raised by me in relation to the Manurewa Oli and to reflect the work that needed to take place there. That's great. And also to acknowledge the staff for addressing the bid by the Auckland Botanic Gardens for their operating funding, and to acknowledge the Mayor's assistance and cooperation with addressing that, which will secure that biennial event, which is a great regional event, but it's a very significant level of assistance that will be fully leveraged by Friends through the raising of third-party funding and sponsorship to enable a sculpture in the gardens. And I referred to Roman numeral 25 there, so thank you very much.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to thank the staff, the staff in this room, our councillor support advisors, the people, democracy services, the finance team, that everyone in their different categories that have been working their butts off for us on our myriad of questions, on trying to fit it all together. $70 billion budget isn't just an easy, simple thing to weave together, especially when you've got all of our competing interests, as well as the local board's competing interests and the community's competing interests on top of the CCO. So just want to first of all thank everyone, because I know that the people who work here really have a passion for our city and what we're doing and want to get it right for us as well. Also, thank you to our local boards and CCOs. They're as much, we're sitting around this table today, but they've influenced every part of this document as well. And not everyone will be happy in every area, but I think we've all tried to get parts of what each area has wanted and needed, and we will see those come through. I think we get stuck in weeks and weeks and weeks of workshops and meetings and individual decisions that can be fiery, that can be positive, that can be all unanimous, and we kind of forget the overall picture because we get bogged down in so much. But I think, and it's shown by the comments so far, that the thank yous, we're generally quite happy, which is good. It feels like we're getting things done. People continuously go, why aren't you fixing transport? Why aren't you addressing the water issues? Why is there sewage in our oceans? Why have you done nothing about Cody dieback? Where's the arts funding? But this budget seems to be including just about everything. We're even including funds finally for coastal erosion and damage, for climate change impacts to our infrastructure, huge increases to our new renewals program, which means new playgrounds, new assets, new sports fields, libraries, things that will be replaced over time. Obviously it won't be in the first year. The local board initiatives, has far outpassed the amount we thought we could fund, and that's by working it all and weaving it together. And of course, all of us would like our projects in the first year or two, but that's not going to be exactly how it's going to work. But I think everyone's come to a point where I feel personally that it's working together, and this is the whole point. This is why we sit here, is for the people of our city, some who will hate us no matter what, others who maybe don't even know this is happening today. Most people probably don't know this is happening today. But when you go around your city and you get on the bus, or you sit in traffic, or you go to the art gallery, or the zoo, or our stadiums, or our playgrounds, or the libraries, and the rubbish on the streets getting picked up, and that's why we're here. And this budget is really showing that, and I feel like we've all worked together. And I know I sometimes get into the kumbaya mode, but I think it can seem a little daunting, but I think, congratulations to the Mayor and everyone who's worked on this. We're getting great things for my local area, but also around the city, all the things that we need to do in the Waitakeres or the roads and transport around the city. So I'm just excited. I think you kind of forget the excitement, but this is really, really good. It won't be perfect, nothing is, but we are actually standing up to the challenges and the things people demand of us when we're at every meeting, when we're sitting out in the public or listening to the tweets and Facebook messages, that this is what people want. And I think we're delivering together most of what people are asking for. So I'm pretty stoked, really. So thank you.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to speak to item B1 there, specifically around projects identified regionally and for Rodney. I think it's fair to acknowledge some excellent work that's occurred around that. Obviously, we know my viewpoint about how I feel like some of those should be funded, but nevertheless, I think the people of Rodney would agree with the projects that have been identified there. There's obviously the road sealing, or a significant health and particularly safety issue regionally. There's a quadrupling of the budget there, and a lot of that money, as we heard, is allocated for the Rodney area, and I'm sure the rural sector will be very grateful for that. In addition to that, there's another 122 million for regionally to improve the general safety of roads, and it's identified as rural roads. Those may be sealed or unsealed roads, but the number of deaths that are actually occurring on sealed roads in the rural area are unacceptable, and I think that's a very, very good move, and I congratulate the Mayor and others involved in bringing that together. Although it's a good start, I feel there's still a lot that can be done for Rodney in terms of because there's been so much underinvestment in that area of Auckland for so many years. Just for all the local boards, great to see their transport capital funds being increased. Very positive change for empowering the local boards to be able to do more locally for their local communities. I think for Rodney that'll be things like footpaths and pathways, greenway plans, pedestrian crossings, and probably numerous overdue safety traffic issues locally. Thus, it's excellent to see another 45 million identified regionally for building of footpaths, and hopefully we might see some of that occurring in Rodney as well. The budget does show money allocated for what's described as fixing the worst, well, not in the plan, but described as the worst intersection in New Zealand, and that's that Hill Street intersection up at Warkworth. So the sooner that can get underway, the better. That won't only help locals, of course, that will help all Aucklanders travelling north, and also our freight services travelling north as well. However, I feel like there have been some oversights for Rodney that have been alluded to by other neighbouring councillors, and I just feel that I should highlight those to do the right thing by my constituents, and that's really around Kimu area and the horrific traffic congestion they've got down State Highway 16, Mr Chair. And there's little hope in the next 10 years, though, obviously, that we haven't got the heavy rail diesel service, any work being proposed for that, which the locals would see as a probably immediate fix. And of course, there's a bypass road to go around Kimu as well, which doesn't, with some early funding in terms of business cases and perhaps designating land is there, but not the actual building of that bypass for the next 10 years. I'd just like to remind my colleagues about the local government commission inquiry that happened, and they looked at Rodney, and one of the findings there, what they emphasised was the need for Auckland Council to address those legacy issues. So I just want to re-highlight that again, that the commission did recommend that Auckland Council dedicated Auckland Council funds to address historical underinvestment in the area regarding transport projects. I think Kimu Huapai district deserves their traffic issues to be fixed just as much as any other community. And just in closing, Mr Chair, there's a whole lot of little suburbs out in that ward: Riverhead, Helensville, Kaukapa, Southhead, Puhoi, Lee, Tahana, Wellsford, and many other Auckland suburbs, which remain underinvested, and now they are in partnership with the super city, particularly with regard to bus services to them, just basic footpathing, and perhaps even simple park and rides, i.e. where can you park on the grass to catch the bus from. So in my mind, Mr Chair, those should be regionally funded projects. These suburbs continue to be underfunded, and regionally, I think as regional councillors, we should ask, well, how come they've been so underinvested for so long? And as regional councillors, what can we do to address that going forward? So thank you. Very good start for Rodney there, but I guess my message there is a good start, but still there's quite a lot of historical underinvestment to catch up on in that area. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. I have Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It is nice to have a chance to say thank you. You know, in this job we don't get a lot of chance to acknowledge. It's usually fairly stressful, difficult, and often confrontational, and sometimes unfathomable. But this is my chance to say thank you, Mr Mayor, for two things. The Sport and Rec Facilities Fund, which Councillor Fletcher quite rightly acknowledged as a really big step. Our sporting codes have got together and developed a regional plan for all our sporting codes. It's a remarkable piece of work. You know, a few years ago our sporting codes were warring with one another, saying, you know, who will use these fields and how do we scrap over the few resources that we've got. For these codes to all get together and come up with an agreed plan, we're now dignifying it with a fairly sizable fund to say, let's partner with you and get some of this off the ground. And I think that will be well appreciated. And I hope people understand the enormity of opportunity that this delivers up. Secondly, on the Western Initiative, you know, our whole city does well if our most vulnerable communities do well. None of us can cheer on this being a super city when our children are, you know, jobless and our families are sleeping in cars. And, you know, believe you me, Councillor Cooper and Councillor Clough and I know that out west it's not always a bowl of roses or whatever the expression is. But the Western Initiative, simply put, it's not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet, but it actually gives those really strong communities and those strong networks a chance to come together and focus with some really talented staff and some learning from the great Southern Initiative, which I think is just awesome. It's that learning from the South that, you know, do it hood by hood, communities strengthening themselves and then strengthening economic development, community by community. So the West will make the absolute most of this opportunity, Mr Mayor. It's not a huge amount of money, but it opens the door to government funding opportunities, to philanthropic opportunities, and to making the absolute most. You know, the old, for each dollar, the community can turn that into 5 by some really hard work and vision. So that's what the Western Initiative is all about. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that one. You know, yeah, I really, really do, because it's taken an awful lot of work to get it to this point. And thank you. Yeah, sorry, this is really personal, this one. The Mayor said to me, I'd like a business case for this, and which is a good thing for a Mayor to ask. And I said, Phil, we can write you any kind of business case, and we can make all the numbers fit, and we can make their KPIs the best KPIs in the world. But this is an issue of trust. And this is me saying to you, I know the West will deliver for you. Trust me on this one, and you did. Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Oh, thank you. I think this section is probably the grunty section of the budget here. And I just also want to dwell, because we've been consumed in numerous workshops, drowning in numbers and challenges and toing and froing. I'd also like to just stress again the importance of that that shapeshifter that the transport budget is going to deliver. It's just enormous. I think it'll be generations to come that will look back and go, that was when they started. That's when they really got into gear. It was back then in 2018. And it won't be our tree. Well, it'll be our tree, but it'll be somebody else's shade.
That's right.
And that's a great thing. And we won't be there for the ribbon snipping events, but you know, many, many others will be. Hey, look, I do want to dwell on that transport budget, as Councillor Sayers is saying, great for Rodney, great for Franklin and everybody in between. I'm not going to just say it's great, I'm actually going to back it up and vote for it. And that's what it takes to make a difference. It's not just saying the words, it's backing the words up. And I think that's incumbent upon us all here today. Councillor Fletcher and Hulse have rightly drawn attention to the significance of the Sport and Rec Fund. That is huge. One I want to dwell on, and it's our nuclear-free moment, attention to climate change. We have established for the first time and recognised the importance of climate change at Auckland Council. Isn't that something? 40 million, and then we've got another 90 million for coastal asset management. That is just the foundation budget, and that one in time is likely to have to be enormous, because we know what sort of tsunami is coming at us. But it is there, it is the foundation of what we need to address. I want to acknowledge the Chief Sustainability Officer that the Chief Executive put in place just, I think, 2 years ago. John Moreau and a passionate team, I think of around about 20 in his office, who are just marvels and have brought us up, helped bring us all politically up to pace. A few others there, we've covered the smoke-free, and thank you to the members for that unanimous decision. Yes, there's an additional $55 million over and above the draft budget for the city centre. A lot of our residents think, why are we spending so much money in the city centre? Well, do you know a quarter of Auckland intersects with the city centre pretty much on a daily basis? You know, there's 100,000 people working there, there's 100,000 students, there's around about 60,000 people living in the city centre now. It's the fastest growing part of Auckland. It's the economic anchor of Auckland, and people are flocking to it. Regional visitors, national visitors from across the nation, and of course international visitors. And I want to just reiterate what we pull out of the city centre in general rates is about $1 billion over the next 10 years. That's in general rates, and we'll be pulling out targeted rates courtesy of the residents there to the tune of another $140 million just over the 7. There has been a little oversight whereby it's only 7 years for the city centre targeted rate and not 10. But we'll deal with that in the annual plan review, I'm sure. Now, another one that I'm really delighted to support, even though I was tweaking it before, is support for the Auckland City Mission. And Mayor, I saw your release today. Housing First has homed, in a very short period, if I'm correct, 620 people in a very short period. So here's another initiative that we've grabbed by the scruff of the neck and said it's important, and we're already getting runs on the board, and I have a lot of confidence in the Auckland City Mission getting even further runs on the board and bringing people into safe, secure, with environments to live in, with wraparound services to keep them in those new living environments. And lastly, I just want to draw some emphasis to a matter that Councillor Casey began on, and that was the Tupuna Maunga Authority's budget. I'm aware, I did not realise this until some years ago, that we inherited miserly, miserable, pathetic little budgets for our maunga. They have gone up in this council's time, since the Tupuna Maunga Authority has been established, by around about 250%. They are currently standing, with the amendments today, I estimate at around about $155 million, give or take, over 10 years. Our maunga were ignored by the previous councils, and I say that having been a North Shore City Councillor, I did not know how much neglect there was for the maunga in my area of Takarunga, Mount Victoria. I did not realise it. I also want to emphasise something that Councillor Casey alluded to and was very diplomatic about, a meeting last week in Devonport that was, if not ignorance, it was either bullying or racism at its worst. It has been documented by some media. For those of us that were there, we know it was probably all three categories. Our members, our councillor members current and those past, were criticised by a local board member for not acting in the interests of the local board and the community. I can now say, and I want to say it publicly here, that I have never ever received any correspondence, email, semaphore or pigeon connection from that local board member asking for any budget for the Tupuna Maunga Authority and specifically Takarunga. And we have increased the budget significantly without it. And I earlier highlighted a category of local board impact that had blank. You'll recall that on the first agenda of today. It is the only board that drew blank. Councillor Casey, Philippina, before us, Councillor Clow, Cashmore, and I'm sure I've missed Councillor Bartley, we have all strongly advocated for all the communities that intersect with the Maunga, and we have delivered a $155 million budget for the future. Thank you.
Well said, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Again, I acknowledge everyone that's been involved in this budget, and thank the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and yourself as Chair of Finance and Performance for this budget. I want to, and the staff as well, of course. I want to comment on the coastal compartment management plans and the $90 million that is going in there through the budget, and the 8 local boards, the cluster of 8 local boards who have raised coastal erosion as an issue, and Angela Full-James there, and who work with the local boards about coastal erosion. So that is really, really good to see in the budget. And you know, in my area we have a nature walk. It's beautiful. You got to get up at 5 a.m. and you hear the birds, but you can't actually do that walk as a member of the public because the track has fallen into the water. So I'm really hoping that our Waiotaki Bay Nature Reserve will benefit from this coastal fund. I'm glad to see Auckland City Mission are getting something in light of the $55 million that's going to the city centre upgrades, because I still think we could give a bit more, because you can't have a fancied up Queen Street and have people sleeping on it. But you know, there's something there, and there's the housing first. So you know, hopefully we can do more to assist those that are sleeping rough in our area. I didn't get to speak about Citizens Advice Bureau, but I will say that I support that we're giving them an extra hand, because they do a lot in our communities, and I want to acknowledge their flexibility in trying to meet the needs of the local communities that they're based in. For instance, in Onehunga, they're trying to train up their volunteers to do housing advocacy because of the Oranga housing development that's happening through HLC and Housing New Zealand. So really appreciate what CAB is doing in that regard. Awesome about water quality rate. You know, water knows no boundaries, so the benefits will flow to the rest of the areas of Auckland, and I do make a point of the F rating in the Tamaki estuary there, and the D in Manukau. Sport and rec is awesome to see. You know, there's so many benefits of sport, not only health but also for our young people that are a bit off track. And on that note, I want to acknowledge that it is really good to see the support for the Hibiscus Coast Youth Centre, and I look forward to that report about the provision, or the review of Council's provision of financial support to youth centres, because I think I'm the second youngest councillor around this table, in spite of the grey hair. So I'm glad. I'm pretty sure I'm the second.
No, I'm the second.
And yes, so I'm really keen to see that support for our young people. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, well, we're down to, I think, the last 2 people who want to speak, and that's the mover and the seconder. So I'll be brief. When the Mayor was elected and asked me whether I'd be interested in a senior position, I said yes, I would be, and I'd really only be interested in being Chair of the Finance Committee. I warned him I had an independent streak, and therefore he would get contestable advice and direction, which I think I've delivered, but I think I'm always constructive in where I come from. We agreed fairly early on about how to restructure any targeted rates we would do, and that we would move away from the iniquity of effectively no capital value and business units paying as much as any individual ratepayer. So we moved and to including the business differential has been the goal, and I will say the long-term business differential has been the goal, but also introducing capital value as the basis. I'm sorry to Gail and the team and Penny for stepping in and suggesting that maybe the initial Mayor's proposal on the higher environmental targeted rate was a little error, and therefore threw his 2.5 out a little bit, and it got changed, and we've brought it in. But there's been three things I'm particularly proud of and I will say it's been good to have that contestable discussion with the mayoral office on particularly Panuku originally. We had our disagreements, but I'm pretty damn proud that the Panuku program is in there and the way it is in there, because I think it's really important, and in hindsight and with foresight, it's important given that the Labor government is sending the signal on economic development agencies, and we need to be in there being strong and doing and making sure we are not going to get overruled at every corner in the placemaking. The other one is Councillor Simpson and myself have championed the new concept of the Ollies, and I know the Mayor has been horrified to say how the hell did 200 million morph into 470, but it's all within budget, and I heard what Councillor Fletcher said, we need to set something more tighter next time, but I mean we really didn't know how long that piece of string was going to be, but I think the delivery is, we've pretty well got every local board by and large pretty happy with how it's been delivered, so thank you Councillor Simpson for that. And then just a big thing, just an overriding theme that I've given advice to the Mayor on is just make this an all of Auckland budget. Don't make this a downtown budget, or a CBD budget, or just overall transport budget, and that it needs to have delivery in the suburbs, and each local board needs to see things happening, because it's not just the unlock and the transform areas. We've got areas like Papakura and Manurewa that honestly are hurting, that need more work in the future, just like many other areas, so we can't forget about some of those more distant town centres and community boards, local boards I should say. So anyway, on that, that's all I'm going to say, and I think it's been a very good budget. If we pass all this, we've only got two notes that are going to note their concerns about something, so I'll pass on to the Mayor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm just going to remind myself and everybody else that we're at item 9 of an 18-item agenda. It's now 4 o'clock and we still have to ratify this with the GB. So I'm going to be very brief. And it's mainly just a thank you, and a special thank you, I think, to Ross Clough and to Desley Simpson as the Chair and Vice Chair of the Finance and Performance Committee. This committee has carried the weight of the process of the budget, and I think they've done a fantastic job, so thank you to both of you. But thank you to everybody here. Look, I had to, the Deputy Mayor belted me on the shoulder and said, this isn't normal. I don't know that I've ever seen such an amazingly positive response right around the table. But I think that's fantastic. It shows that everybody feels that they've got ownership over this budget, they've had input into it. We haven't done everything, we'll never do everything, but we've made a pretty good input for what lies ahead over the next 10 years. So thank you very much for that. I just can't resist the opportunity to say, if we didn't have those two targeted rates in the regional fuel tax, the tone of this conversation would have been totally different, because there would have been no money in this area and we would have been scraping to put anything into the fundamentals. We have done, I think, the balancing job of not being tough on the ratepayers, making sure they knew where the money is being spent, doing things to transform, doing things to make this a better city, but keeping in mind that, you know, average general rate increase 2.5%, but with the transparent targeted rates at the areas we wanted to transform and the transport system. So, look, I think this has been great. I appreciate your positivity, I appreciate your support, I appreciate your thanks, and that thanks actually is not simply to me. I'm just one of the group around this table. It's a thanks to everyone, staff members, my office, councillors, IMSB, for cooperating to produce something that I think is really good for our city. Thank you for that.
Right, councillors. Now I've got the note here that Councillor Walker just wants to make a general, and it's been approved, just a general note against which is his opposition to the targeted accommodation rate, and I've got Councillor Casey wanting to note her objection to number 20. Is there anyone else, before I put it in the block, that wants to note against anything? Nope, so we're just going to put B, and we're going from 1 to 28 now because we had the addition of the new amendment at the end. So I'm going to put the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you,
Wow,
that's fantastic.
it's a bit different from 3
We are
years
going to
ago.
have a break, and we're going to have a 10-minute break to stretch the legs, and then, as the Mayor has pointed out, we're not even on item 10, but I think we can start to pick up pace on these. So, thank you, Councillor.
How long is the 10-minute break, Chair?
10.